My name is Jackson. I'm 34, a staff sergeant in the U.S. Army stationed just outside Fort Lewis, Washington. Today started like any other, running diagnostics and reviewing technical reports, but I could feel the tension in the air the moment I walked into the operations bay. Somehow I'd been reassigned to a peripheral section, away from the main project, stripped of the tasks I had trained for and trusted with, and the silence in this part of the base made every step echo like a warning. The walls around me were bare, the fluorescent lights flickered faintly, and the chill from the concrete floors seeped into my boots, reminding me how alone I was. I knew it wasn't random. Someone had orchestrated this, sidelining me under the guise of routine assignments, keeping me away from the work that mattered. My stomach tightened as I realized that every colleague I passed seemed aware of this reassignment, yet no one offered a word of comfort or explanation, only the cold hum of machines and the faint metallic scent of the facility. I tried to focus on my limited tasks, but every detail reminded me of what I had lost control, respect, access to critical systems. The quiet weighed heavily on me, each tick of the clock amplifying the sense of isolation. Still beneath the tension, I felt a spark of resolve. I wasn't going to sit idle while things fell apart around me. Mitch had a way of walking into a room that made everyone uneasy, like the air itself shifted in his presence. Alongside him were Daryl and Kenny, always lurking close, ready to enforce whatever scheme he cooked up. Over the past few weeks, I noticed subtle changes. Projects I had built were reassigned, critical logs vanished, and my access to the main systems was increasingly restricted, as if they wanted me out of the picture without a single confrontation. I watched from my peripheral section as my previous work was quietly erased, overwritten, and claimed by others, and a surge of frustration rose in my chest. Mitch seemed to take pleasure in bending rules and exploiting loopholes, while Daryl and Kenny laughed in corners or whispered between themselves, monitoring my reactions and enjoying the tension they created. The unfairness of it all hit hard, but I forced myself to breathe, to slow my heart, because losing control of my emotions would give them exactly what they wanted. Despite the constant pressure, I began planning my next moves, cataloging patterns in their behavior and the gaps in their oversight. Every deleted log, every reassignment, every whisper of a mocking comment became a puzzle piece I could use later. The feeling of being cornered was sharp, but within that pressure, a quiet determination grew. I wasn't going to let them dictate my outcome, and I started identifying where I could strike back logically and efficiently. I spent the next few hours meticulously scanning the limited systems I still had access to, tracing every pathway that Mitch or his allies might have overlooked. In the far corner of the network, I noticed an old terminal with a default password that hadn't been changed since installation, a small oversight that would have gone unnoticed by anyone else. My pulse quickened, but I stayed calm, understanding that any mistake now could ruin everything I was trying to uncover. Sliding into the terminal, I navigated carefully, each keystroke deliberate, tracing the network nodes until I gained access to partial logs and archived emails. They weren't complete, but they were enough to show patterns of reassignment, deleted files, and altered project histories that consistently targeted me. Every entry revealed a calculated effort to sideline me, and yet it was sloppy in the small ways only someone with my experience would notice. Using skills honed from years of technical work in high-pressure military operations, I started extracting data, carefully mirroring the information to a secure encrypted drive. I organized the logs by project and date, noting which files had been tampered with and how the deletion patterns suggested intentional interference. My hands moved steadily over the keyboard, the quiet of the isolated workspace amplifying every keystroke, while my mind ran multiple scenarios of how to use the data without alerting the perpetrators. I encountered hurdles, false trails, and encrypted folders designed to slow any intruder, but I treated each challenge like a tactical problem on the field. Timing, patience, and careful observation were key. Rushing would leave traces, and any trace could alert Mitch or his allies. By piecing together the anomalies in workflow, I began to reconstruct a timeline showing exactly when and how my projects were sabotaged. Some files required ingenuity to access. I remembered a default admin token that had been left active on an old backup node, something I had encountered in training exercises, but rarely in active deployment. Exploiting that, I gained a window into emails that confirmed the deliberate sidelining and mockery of my efforts. The data painted a pattern too consistent to ignore, showing intent coordination and a clear target: me. Hours passed like minutes as I continued. I cross-referenced timestamps, user activity, and project edits, confirming that Daryl and Kenny were also involved, executing Mitch's directives while documenting nothing that could incriminate them directly. Every misstep they had made became a breadcrumb trail, each one reinforcing my growing understanding of the full picture. I realized that this was more than petty sabotage. It was a systematic attempt to discredit my work and prevent me from advancing. By late evening, I had compiled a preliminary dossier of logs, emails, and records that revealed the pattern. It wasn't the full story yet, but it was enough to show that my efforts to isolate and undermine me were deliberate and ongoing. Sitting back, I let myself breathe for a moment, acknowledging the pressure and the weight of the evidence. This was just the beginning, and I knew the next steps would require precision, patience, and a strategy that leveraged every advantage I had in skill and knowledge. Every move had to be deliberate. The stakes were high, and I was aware that exposure too early could backfire. But within the quiet tension of the dimly lit workspace, I felt a growing sense of control and clarity. The lopsided power dynamic Mitch had relied on was shifting ever so slightly, and the pieces were slowly falling into place for the first real chance I had to turn the tables. I catalogued the evidence, meticulously labeling each entry with date, time, and source, knowing that credibility would be essential when presenting this to the command structure. The process was methodical, like a military operation, every step designed to preserve the integrity of the data. My mind was alert, analytical, yet I felt the faint thrill of empowerment as I realized that the smallest oversight had become the linchpin of my counter-strategy. By midnight, I had a clear map of the network's weak points, a dossier of manipulated files, and a record of every deliberate act aimed at undermining me. Each log, email, and token I had captured was a small victory, proof that patience and technical skill could outmaneuver intent and malice. For the first time since being sidelined, I felt like the balance was shifting and the next move was mine to make. I first noticed Val during a routine system checker technician assigned to monitor security logs and access anomalies, usually quiet, almost invisible. Over time, I realized she had her own reasons for skepticism. Her own reports had been altered, emails redirected, and minor sabotage in her tasks mirrored what I was experiencing. It wasn't blind luck that she knew something was wrong, and when our paths crossed near a less monitored terminal, it was clear we shared a silent understanding. We started working together in the shadows, coordinating quietly, sharing findings without leaving digital traces. Val brought insights I didn't have, noticing inconsistencies in timestamps and flagging transactions that seemed off by only a few minutes. I mapped them against the partial data I had from the overlooked access point, creating a more complete picture of the system-wide manipulation. The tension was constant, every keystroke could be noticed, every alert could trigger suspicion. We had to time our collaboration carefully, alternating shifts at the terminal, encrypting our notes, and leaving no trace of our activity. As the layers of deception revealed themselves, I began to see the scale of what Mitch and his allies had orchestrated, affecting not just my work, but the entire unit's operational integrity. Val suggested we segment the data, categorized by project and user, and cross-reference the anomalies. Together, we discovered that files had been intentionally misfiled, project histories altered, and communications deleted to cover tracks. Each discovery was a small victory, but also a reminder that a single mistake could expose us, so we moved slowly, deliberately, and with constant vigilance. We also began testing theories about how access was being manipulated, identifying weak points in the system left by the very people trying to cover their tracks. By comparing logs and analyzing system behavior, we could predict what the perpetrators would do next and preemptively secure the evidence. This back and forth required coordination and trust. One misstep, one wrong assumption, and all of our work could be lost. As hours passed, the isolation of our workspace felt less suffocating because we weren't alone in the fight anymore. Sharing insights with Val not only validated my findings, but also strengthened my resolve. I could feel the momentum building, the small victories stacking, and the realization that we could expose the full scope of the sabotage without drawing attention until the moment was right. Finally, we organized the evidence in a way that was both thorough and defensible. Logs, emails, and modified entries were catalogued meticulously with timestamps and cross-references for every alteration. We didn't celebrate. It was too early, and the risk remained high, but a quiet satisfaction settled in. Our plan was unfolding exactly as intended, and the foundation for confronting the perpetrators was ready. Even in the stillness of the night as we worked side by side, the tension never fully subsided. Every sound outside the terminal felt amplified, a reminder that discovery could happen at any second. But the trust between us, the shared purpose, and the evidence we had gathered gave a rare sense of control in an environment that had tried to strip us of it, and I realized for the first time that we might actually have the leverage to turn the tables. We paused only to review our progress, confirming that each piece of data was secured and categorized properly. There was no room for error, and we treated the information like it was a live operation, each file a target to protect. By the time we finished, the partial system access I had been using was fully maximized, and together with Val, we had a blueprint of the sabotage that was both comprehensive and indisputable. The moment to act arrived with a quiet intensity. I compiled every log entry, cross-referenced emails with timestamps, and tracked every financial transaction that had been manipulated. Each piece of data was carefully verified, hashed, and stored to ensure it could not be tampered with, creating a digital record that was airtight and irrefutable. With Val at my side, we reviewed the evidence one last time, making sure nothing was out of place. The scale of the operation became clear. Patterns of deletion, reassignment, and falsification spanned months, implicating Mitch, Daryl, and Kenny in coordinated efforts to undermine and manipulate. The meticulous documentation left no room for doubt, each file a thread in a web of intentional misconduct. I prepared the presentation for the command team, arranging the data logically and securely, knowing that clarity and precision were as important as the evidence itself. Every graph log and email chain told a story of deliberate sabotage, and I could almost hear the reactions before they arrived. There was no need for embellishment. The truth alone would be enough to break the illusion of control they had built. When the meeting started, Mitch tried to project confidence, his posture rigid and forced. I calmly walked the command team through the logs, demonstrating inconsistencies and showing exactly how projects had been manipulated. Daryl and Kenny's faces tightened with each revelation, their earlier smugness replaced with a mix of panic and disbelief. The digital evidence was overwhelming, and I watched as the command team absorbed every detail, nodding and taking notes. There was no arguing with a timeline that could be verified against independent records, and no way for Mitch or his allies to claim innocence. I felt the tension in the room shift subtly, the power dynamic flipping with every piece of indisputable proof I revealed. I could see Mitch's frustration building, the tight lines around his mouth, betraying the fear beneath the facade. Val chimed in at critical points, explaining the technical details with precision, and the cohesion of our presentation made the sabotage undeniable. The sense of control I'd felt while gathering the data now translated into a commanding presence in front of the decision-makers. By the time we finished, the room was silent, except for the quiet typing of notes. The reaction of the perpetrators was muted yet telling. They were cornered, stripped of excuses, and their authority evaporated. I felt a mix of relief and satisfaction, knowing that months of careful observation, analysis, and collaboration had culminated in a moment of irrefutable justice. The command team began asking questions, seeking clarification, and I answered calmly, referencing the timestamps, hashes, and cross-references that confirmed every claim. There was no room for manipulation, no ambiguity, only the precise sequence of events we had documented. As the discussion shifted toward corrective actions, I could feel the catharsis settling in the culmination of planning, patience, and skill, manifesting in real results. When the decision was made to rectify the situation, I quietly exhaled, recognizing that the balance had shifted. The evidence we had prepared would not just expose wrongdoing, it would prevent further interference and protect the integrity of the unit. Every calculated move I had made to preserve and organize the data ensured that justice was now inevitable. As the meeting concluded, Mitch and his allies were left standing awkwardly powerless while the command team moved swiftly to implement measures. Val gave a small nod, a shared acknowledgement of the work and the risks we had taken. In that moment, I realized that our careful planning, attention to detail, and ability to stay calm under pressure had achieved more than vindication. It had restored order and accountability in a place that desperately needed it. The victory was quiet but complete. I felt the weight of months of tension lift, slightly replaced by the satisfaction of having executed a precise, calculated strategy. The evidence was secured, the perpetrators exposed, and the integrity of our operations restored, all without compromising our professionalism or leaving room for dispute. In the silence that followed, I finally allowed myself to acknowledge the magnitude of what we had accomplished. After the evidence had been presented and the perpetrators removed, I turned my attention to rebuilding the operational structure. The first step was transparency. Every project, every log, every update was documented and accessible to the team, eliminating hidden agendas and ensuring accountability. It felt strange at first to open every system I had previously kept segmented, but the clarity it created allowed everyone to trust the process. I worked closely with Val and the remaining team members to establish standardized procedures for reporting, tracking, and auditing work. Mistakes were now visible and addressed constructively, not hidden or used as tools for manipulation. The change in atmosphere was immediate. People began to collaborate, ask questions, and share knowledge without fear of retribution, and the overall efficiency improved measurably. Bringing in new recruits reinforced this cultural shift. I focused on integrity and curiosity over experience or pedigree, inviting those who were eager to learn and honest in their approach. The environment became one where innovation was encouraged, errors were learning opportunities, and recognition was given where it was earned, not manipulated. Even simple moments of teamwork were satisfying, like watching colleagues troubleshoot a complex task together without secrecy or competition. It was clear that the culture had shifted from fear and suspicion to mutual support. Clients noticed, too, appreciating the improved communication and accountability, and the quality of work became a point of pride for the unit. Through it all, I reflected on what had allowed me to navigate this challenge: patience, skill, and adherence to principle. Every step had required careful planning, meticulous attention to detail, and a refusal to be intimidated by those abusing power. The lesson was clear: success built on integrity endures, while shortcuts and deceit eventually crumble. Occasionally, I would sit quietly reviewing the systems I had rebuilt, thinking back to the months of tension and obstruction. Not relief that they were gone. Relief that I was still here. That simple thought carried the weight of everything we had accomplished, the injustices corrected, and the future secured for anyone who followed in our steps. I also made it a priority to mentor the new team, ensuring they understood not only the technical processes, but the value of honesty and accountability. This investment in culture was as important as the data or the systems themselves, creating a resilient environment where everyone could contribute without fear. Seeing them learn, adapt, and thrive reinforced why the fight had been worth it. The sense of accomplishment was tempered by humility. This was not about personal glory, but about restoring balance and fairness. Every correction, every guideline, and every transparent log was a testament to the power of careful strategy and ethical action. The satisfaction lay in knowing that the organization could now operate efficiently and that no one would be unfairly silenced or undermined again. In quiet moments, I would review the secure drives, reminding myself of the hours spent analyzing, cataloging, and defending the integrity of the system. Each file, each log was proof that deliberate, principled effort can overcome manipulation and injustice. The relief and pride I felt were grounded in knowing that we had built a foundation that would outlast any single challenge or individual. The team thrived under the new structure, producing results faster and more reliably than before, and the relationships within the unit strengthened. Val became a trusted advisor, and new recruits adapted quickly to the culture of transparency and collaboration. Watching this transformation reinforced the central lesson: patience, skill, and unwavering integrity are the most powerful tools anyone can wield. By the end of the first month, the base operated with a renewed sense of purpose, confidence, and accountability. Every success, every improvement, and every acknowledgement of effort reinforced the principle that fairness and diligence pay off. I had learned that victory is not just about exposure or retribution, but about creating lasting change-building systems that honor skill and honesty and mentoring others to maintain it. Looking back, I realized that none of this would have happened if I had given up at the first sign of obstruction. Patience and persistence were my most powerful tools, and the ability to remain calm under pressure made the difference between being sidelined and reclaiming control. Every small decision, every methodical step was part of a bigger strategy to restore integrity and fairness. I want to tell anyone listening that fighting for the truth is rarely straightforward, and it often requires navigating discomfort, skepticism, and risk. There will be moments when it feels easier to stay quiet, to accept the status quo. But those are precisely the moments that define your character. Standing firm, even when alone, can create ripple effects that extend far beyond your immediate environment. Val's support reminded me that collaboration, trust, and shared expertise amplify impact. You don't always have to go it alone, and seeking allies who understand the stakes can turn a desperate situation into a manageable one. Together, we not only exposed wrongdoing, but also built a system that would prevent similar abuses from happening in the future. As I reflect on the months of careful work, I feel a quiet pride, not just in exposing the misconduct, but in rebuilding something better. The base is more transparent, projects are tracked fairly, and team members trust one another. That feeling, knowing that a fair structure now exists for others, carries more weight than any personal victory. I also learned that intelligence, discipline, and patience must go hand in hand with integrity. Without adherence to principle, skill can be wasted or misused. By staying true to what is right, even in the face of intimidation, you create outcomes that endure and inspire. There is a deeper lesson. Two systems often fail when people accept deception or shortcuts. The work we do to maintain fairness, accuracy, and accountability matters because it protects everyone, not just ourselves. Small actions can accumulate into meaningful change, especially when guided by thoughtful planning and ethical conduct. I want to leave you with a thought that continues to resonate with me. It isn't relief that the perpetrators were removed. Relief comes from knowing that you remained standing, that your principles held, and that you had the courage to act. That perspective transforms obstacles into lessons and setbacks into motivation. Finally, I want to challenge anyone watching to reflect on their own principles and courage. If you were in my position, faced with deception, sabotage, or systemic unfairness, what would you do to protect your integrity? How would you ensure that truth and accountability prevail, even when the odds are against you? The answer may not be simple, but it is the measure of what you are willing to fight for. The story ends here, but the lesson continues. Every choice matters, every ethical action counts, and persistence can reshape an environment that seems broken. I hope this serves as a reminder that vigilance, skill, and principle can overcome even the most calculated attempts to silence or undermine you. The challenge is yours to face next.